Dishonorable Mention is brought to you by 813area.com. 813area.com is the place to go to see where to go and what to do in all of Hillsborough County. Whether it's the best events, the newest restaurants, or where to be in Tampa Bay, 813 Area is your resource for everything happening around town. For the latest on where to be in 813, check out 813area.com. Dishonorable Mention is now on social media. Follow us on Facebook, and we're at Dishonorable Pod on Twitter too. Next week, we'll start taking questions from Twitter because y'all have been an amazing part of this. Thank you.
All right, so welcome to a very special episode of Dishonorable Mention. I don't know if you guys remember, like in the 80s, they always had on the sitcoms when it was like a serious topic, they'd always say a very special episode of A Different Strokes, and then something like bad would happen to Kimberly.
And I was like 4 years old.
Is it a Minnesota? Is this a Minnesota instead of an episode?
Did I say, what did I say?
Episode, but it could be a Minnesota because it's so small.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, knowing us, it'll end up being long. So on this very special episode
All right.
of Dishonorable Mention, we're going to allow you to get to know each of us a little better by interviewing each other, which seems a little bit self-serving, but I promise it won't be. So we'll start with Dr. Carla Mastracchio and the three of us, Representative Chris Latvala, community activist Becca Teeter, and myself, Ernest Hooper of the Tampa Bay Times. We'll ask Carla a couple of questions so you can get to know her a little better, and then we will flip the script and allow her and the rest of us to ask us some questions. So, Carla, I want to start with asking, how did you get into the communications and cultural field? What drew you to those areas?
Well, that's interesting because I was originally a political science major, and I took some communication courses when I was a political science major and realized I could do this thing called political communication. So I really liked presidential language and kind of public communication, and I realized there was a field for that. So I just kind of stuck with it, and I wanted to be a researcher and a professor. So that's kind of what I did and kind of what I do. So.
And you've worked on MacDill Air Force Base with SOCOM?
Yeah, I work for SOCOM right now, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I don't like to talk about for a lot of reasons, but I mean, yeah, I work there.
Do you know, are there things that if you told me you'd have to kill me?
No, I would just go to jail. So I'd rather not do that. I mean,
well, you could tell me and then kill me, and then you wouldn't go to jail.
I could tell you, and then I could go to jail. So I'd rather not.
Right.
I don't look good in orange. So.
That's orange is the new black. I was told, but
Have you ever met Mad Dog Mattis?
He's my favorite boss. I love him. He's great.
Yeah,
I really miss him a lot. He was a great boss.
So what gets you out of bed every day? What excites you about going to work?
Like, I'd still be sleeping if I wasn't here because I had been up for 36 hours straight. But what gets me out of bed? I think connecting people. I'm more of an introvert by nature, but I love connecting people. So I love that we do this because it allows us to connect with people. It also brings, when we have guest hosts and stuff, I think it brings people would normally not have access to kind of the public sphere, and that's kind of my big political project is to help bring different ideas to the public sphere.
You're an introvert?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it takes a lot of energy for me to engage, and then I will go and nap or sleep, or I'm also very lazy. So I have these great plans, and then I'm like, my bed looks really comfy. So
I'm surprised to hear you say that.
Yeah.
I would characterize you as an extrovert.
No.
You seem very comfortable communicating. You're in communications. I wasn't sure an introvert could be in a communication
I think it's more
field.
about energy and kind of what gives me energy and what takes energy away just because I'm comfortable. I mean, I can speak to a room of 1,000 people and just be really tired afterward. It doesn't mean I'm not good at it. It doesn't mean I'm not comfortable. But
what gives you energy?
I think being by myself and watching Investigation Discovery or Dateline. I know
You were supposed to say your husband, but that's okay.
No, because he's an introvert too. So sometimes, like, he was so sweet. So he came with me on my trip to Hawaii. I was just tagging along, and I was so tired, I think day 2, and I just went back to the room and I crashed, and he was like, would Dateline be okay tonight? And I was like, oh, thank you so much. Dateline would be amazing. So, yeah.
So he watches Dateline with you?
No, he'll like read or do something else. He has no interest in true crime, but we fall asleep with it every night. So, because I put it on to go to sleep, he has no choice.
You have so much in common with my wife. It's kind of
we should be best friends.
Man.
We should totally be best friends. Man. I would love that.
You guys would talk forever about Dateline.
I would love A Date with Dateline is one of my favorite podcasts.
I have a friend who's the former executive producer of Dateline, and that we've stayed in touch since I appeared on an episode of Dateline. So maybe I can connect you guys.
I would love that. I think that'd be amazing.
I never found that whenever I was doing opposition research against you.
When I was working,
Whenever I thought you were going to try to take my job.
I would have just looked good on because I was doing undercover work to stop people from abusing folks.
That's amazing.
Well, Carla, where will you be in 5 years, you think?
Oh God. Happy. I don't know.
Who is your political hero?
Oh, that's a hard question for me because I do politics kind of as a research field. So that's a hard question because I don't know if I see them as heroes or I just
Or
like
a
certain
historical
attributes.
hero?
I really like Bush 1, and I'm not a Republican, but I really like Bush 1 for a lot of reasons. You can read chapter 3 of my dissertation if you'd like to know more. But I really like Bush 1. I actually like Reagan for a lot of reasons, media reasons, and the way he chose to use media to frame himself and things like that. Same with Wilson, Kennedy, for a lot of those reasons in terms of public communication.
Can I get a copy of your
You
dissertation?
can download it. It has like 80 downloads so far. You can be like
Really?
81.
Oh, I'd love to do
Yeah.
that. I get the
You can
feeling
just-
I would be really intrigued with
I
what you're
don't think you would, but you could just download that baby, and it's
I'm-
free and open to everyone.
I'm gonna go find that.
You should just Google.
right
I'm very
after this.
Googleable. You can just Google it and you can download it. It's free.
Ooh, awesome. In closing, tell us a little bit about your upbringing, where you were born, where you went to school, all of those things.
I'm pretty basic. I mean, I grew up in South Tampa. I went to private school. I ended up graduating from Plant. I was a double major at USF. I transferred back to USF after about a year at UCF. Went to grad
Knights.
school. I'm pretty basic. I mean, I'm not
Isn't Iowa in this?
Yeah, I mean, I did my PhD at Iowa, but I wasn't a kid. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's so hard. Talking about yourself is always hard, but I feel like I'm
find
pretty
it ve-
basic.
I find it very easy.
I'm very
but-
Palmas. I'm very Palmacia. I'm very Head Park. So
Hey, how did you meet your husband?
we worked together. So I did not date him until the day. Oh God, it was probably like way after I stopped working at CENTCOM. But I met him on his first day of work when he started about 2 months after me.
So when did you know you had like chemistry with him? Was it like instant or did you guys
Oh,
build a
no.
relationship?
I knew him for a really, really long time. And I worked with him for years. And he was always the guy. He had a family, he was married. And I thought he was just this
Okay.
nice guy at the office. I'm like, okay, great. Have a good weekend. You know, it wasn't anything. He never hung out with us, never went to happy hours. And our group was really close. Like our whole office would go out and drink till really late on Fridays and Saturdays and go out to like McDitton's and the Lodge and all those kind of popular places. And we would always go out and hang out. And he would never go. So I just knew him from the office and I was like, oh, he's so nice. Bye. And that was it. So I really didn't hang out with him. God, years later, when he asked me, he was like, hey, listen, I'm going to spend a lot more time in Tampa for a lot of reasons, but I'm going to like not be traveling as much. You know, I don't really know anyone. Can you show me around and stuff? So I would take him out and
What a
just introduce
stud.
him to people and stuff like that. So
That's cool.
yeah, but
What
it
is-
wasn't anything like, it was just because he knew I was pretty active and I knew a lot of people. So
What is your go-to happy hour spot?
right now I'm really digging Wine and Wood because it's right near my house and I really enjoy their cauliflower. It's like plant-based happy hour food, which I love.
Cauliflower.
And it's awesome. It's buffalo cauliflower.
Oh my
They put
gosh,
the mozzarella on it. So good.
Cauliflower.
So good. That or Haven. Oh, and speaking of, Winefest is this week, and Brooke is just killing it. And I'm so proud of her. And if you get a chance to look at Burns' Instagram.
That would be
and-
Brooke Palmer.
Yeah, she is just absolutely killing it this year with Winefest. And I'm sorry I can't be there. The Grand Tasties today. And I'm, came back from a business trip, so I wasn't able to go. But I'm so ridiculously proud of this event, and I'm so proud of her. So shout out to BP.
It usually sells out very
Seconds,
quickly, right?
within seconds.
Yeah.
And every year they just raise the bar, and it's just awesome. So
All right, Carla, now it's our turn to talk about Chris Latvala.
yeah, it is.
We're excited about that. Chris, What drew you to politics?
Growing up, I was in politics, whether I liked it or not, since my dad was in office from the time I was like 12 years old until I was in college. Back then, I hated politics. As I got older, I wanted to be a sports play-by-play broadcaster until my TV production teacher in high school told me I wasn't cut out to be on TV.
Ouch.
So then I told her that I was going to be in politics instead. And the first election I could vote in was the 2000 presidential election. And I remember casting my first vote in the primary. And I actually did not vote for George W. Bush in the primary. There's another guy that I liked better. But during the general election, I volunteered. I remember being very disappointed the night of the election, thinking that Al Gore had won and became president. But after college, I started working on campaigns. And then in 2006, I became a legislative aide in the Florida House and did that for a few years. And that experience is what made me want to run and be a part of the Florida House of Representatives.
If you were an animal, what animal would you be and why?
Which ones sleep a lot?
Sloths.
A sloth.
Sloths.
That's what I want to come back.
That's my second favorite.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I didn't know you guys all love sloths.
Yeah, they get stressed out very easily though,
have
which
a
I'm like,
I have 2 sloth calendars. I'll have to bring them and show
love
them
the
to you.
best. They really are the
My
best.
friends have called me sloth for years.
They're so kind
They
and they
really
just want to
are.
rest. I mean, it's everything I aspire.
But they do get stressed out a lot, and you can't tell that they get stressed out. So I
You have
feel
to
like
change
that's
the name of the
not.
show to the sloths.
Not the sexiest, but
No, it doesn't sound very exciting.
so
but
Chris, what stuff? Like you have evolved a lot, and you've had the same best friends forever. Let's give a shout out to our
Chris and
Kent, our Disney loving friend, and Chris, your other best friend from childhood. Talk to us about what you were like in high school, stuff you were involved in, your interests.
Well, as was mentioned before on the podcast, I was in the step club. I also was in the drama club and was in a couple plays. I did a lot of stuff in TV production, like the morning announcements. I got suspended from doing the morning announcements a couple times because we would kind of go off script a little bit.
did
And
you use profanity? Did you do something or say something
no, I had a
wrong?
top 10 list of the biggest snobs at school that I did.
Is that really just a cover for people who wouldn't date you and your best friends?
No, like I wasn't a popular kid. My friend Chris Lowstutter, he was very popular.
I've seen a photo. I understand why.
So I had popular friends. He's now married and has kids of his own. But I used to get dates based on girls that he rejected. And I would just kind of swoop in there. And, although there was a time that I dated the captain of the cheerleading team for a few months.
Really?
Yeah. And then
What was her name?
Allison. That didn't last long. And then I had
Add
another
Allison
one.
to
I was
Finding
going to say,
Janine.
can we start talking about Allison instead of Janine?
No, because that wasn't. I mean, she was a great. We were friends after, but then I dated another girl named Lindsay for a year or two.
Wow.
Until I went away for college, and she also is married and has kids.
Can I ask you a personal question on this very public podcast?
Sure.
Your father, Senator Jack LaValle, how shall I say, came under a lot of scrutiny about a year ago, 18 months ago. How difficult was that for you to see his name in the headlines in an unfavorable manner?
Well, it was very difficult. And there's a lot of stuff that, I haven't talked about. And, he was not a perfect person. He's still alive. He's not a perfect person. What he was accused of, though, I do not believe for 1 second he did. And I don't really want to get in specifics of that particular case or that particular young lady. But there was really two of them. One of them was a Senate aide that said that he had done stuff, touched her or whatever, that I don't believe he did. And
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to
Right.
necessarily retry everything, but I just wanted to know the emotion.
Oh yeah. No, it was very tough, and I still see some of those people in, Tallahassee. And I think in a lot of respects, he got a very raw end of the deal. And I think that, through time, it will be shown, who was behind it. And I think it had a lot to do with senators who didn't want their own sins uncovered, and, things that he was able to do as, chair of the Appropriations Committee that senators did not like. And, the case that really, led to his him quitting the legislature was a lady came forward in the report and said that he basically, bribed her, through sex. And it was a lady that he had a consensual relationship with, that spanned years. And the special master never asked him about that case, so he couldn't, take out his phone and say, here's text messages that she sent me, recently. Here's pictures of her at my wedding, a year ago, and things like that. And so I think that his, due process was certainly, I don't think he had any kind of due process privileges. And I think that there were other instances of people that were accused in the Me Too era that really didn't have, a lot of ways that they could defend themselves. And yeah, he said things, and he would be the first to admit that he said things to women that he shouldn't have said, whether it was complimenting them, things like that. But I never saw him touch anybody inappropriately, right. And I never heard of him touching anybody inappropriately.
I don't know if Carla and Becca would agree with this, but I think despite holding elected office, you have remained really humble. It hasn't gone to your head. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, no, Chris and I do not see the world the same way, but he is a good person.
Well, and I was going to ask, how have you managed? Because I've seen some elected officials get on their high horse after getting in office and having the adulation and the attention go to their head. I don't think that's happened with you. And how? Why?
Well, and I think a lot of it was my upbringing. And my parents divorced when I was very young. I was like 3 or 4 years old. So I actually grew up in Jacksonville. But I would come see my dad once a month growing up. And sometimes, more than that. But I would see how he was as a politician and as a public official. And there are a lot of people that are in office that think that they are, God's gift to humanity. And, in reality, in 10 years, nobody's going to have a clue who we were or who we are. And so, our positions, whether it's in Tallahassee or in Washington, are very temporary. And, somebody's going to come and replace us one day. And, we'll go back living and, being a regular member of society. So it's, I think early on, whenever I first got elected, I thought that I was, really the stuff. But then you start working and, 99% of the people in Clearwater or Largo would probably have no clue who I was, if they saw me somewhere. So it's not like, I get, recognized out and about or anything like that. So it's really not, to me, it's not really that big of a deal. It's a great honor, but it's not, a big deal.
Well, I was going to say one of the reasons people don't recognize you is because you are now bearded with a mustache, and the Tampa Bay Times continues to run a headshot of you clean shaven. And I think we need to remedy that, Chris. I think you need to come on down to the Times office and let us get a new headshot of you.
And what article? I saw that they used a headshot of me this week on page 1A, which
above
was like, above the fold.
Page, above the fold.
And what was that article about?
Education.
And teachers getting raises, I believe.
Well, it was about how best to compensate teachers, raises or bonuses.
Right.
And I think you have said it's possible teachers will get pay raises, which would be thrilling.
Yeah, and I was actually driving to the Capitol that morning, and my dad texted me the picture, and he said, "Hey, I just saw this, and I spit out my coffee," because it was a prominent picture of myself.
Like a proud dad.
Yeah, oh yeah, and I think that, now his life is pretty much back to normal, And, in many ways, he's kept the same friends that he's had, but he still, I think, has proud dad moments and whatnot.
All right. That was excellent, Chris. Becca, I want to talk to you, and I want to start with the phrase community activist. As you know, when President Obama first came on the scene, that phrase was somewhat criticized. It was actually his political opponents turned it into something bad. You were very comfortable describing yourself as a community activist. Talk to me a little bit about that. What does it mean to you to be a community activist?
To me, it means that I get the opportunity to take things that I believe in and that I support and make a career out of advocating for them. And I can think of nothing that I would rather do to advance the opportunities for people that I believe are either marginalized or oppressed or who need a larger voice fighting for them. So it is a absolute pleasure. I've been called a lot of things, but that's one of my favorite.
So, for those of you who don't know, Becca and her friend Kelly Addington are huge advocates against sexual assault, particularly on college campuses, and they advocate for sexual empowerment. Tell me a little bit about the message that you guys take to college campuses.
Sure, it'd be my privilege. Number one, we talk about sexual empowerment because we realize that the reason people aren't comfortable talking about sexual assault prevention and creating a culture of consent through education and awareness is because most of us have never had really healthy conversations about what sexual health looks like, what a good relationship looks like. So we romanticize movies, for example, where somebody crawls through your window and you wake up at them staring at you, which in reality is horrifically frightening. So we get a lot of bad messages on that. And we realize the reason for so long people have been ineffective at talking about sexual assault is it just seems so confusing. So we kept taking a step back and we realized we had to get sexually empowered, which has nothing to do with actual sexual contact. It has to do with being confident and comfortable in who you are, being given the tools and the resources and the education to make healthy choices for you, and also show up for those whose choices may not align with your own, but that should not negate you from being a good person and doing the right thing.
This, and I know the answer, but I'd like you to talk about it. How much of your message involves not just warning women, but challenging men to do better? So much of it is, hey, girls, if you're at the party, make sure you put your hand over your cup so no one can put a date rape drug in it, as opposed to saying to men, stop using date rape drugs.
Well, number one, while yes, the majority of sexual assaults are perpetrated by men and the majority of people who are victims of sexual violence and sexual assault are women, we try to really focus on victims and survivors without gender. So we don't necessarily say women do this. We say, here are ways that we can be proactive in our making safe choices, just like we don't assume that all people who are going to assault are men. But we do attack some of the cultural norms that are really toxic, that put undue pressure on men to behave and manifest in a certain way and make it very difficult for them to intervene. And we address some of the systematic oppression that is put on women that make it very difficult for them to stand up and intervene. And so we try to dismantle some of that, not as an us against them, but as, are you a member of this community, and do you feel that you have a sense of responsibility for this community? And if you do, here's how we can get involved. It's not shaming people if they choose to have sex, but until we remove the shame and stigma from people engaging in sexual activity, we'll never create an environment where survivors will come forward.
I think you have been involved in this for 15 years?
15 years, started in college.
How much has it changed in 15 years?
In all candor, and this is probably something I'm most proud of, because unlike Carla, I don't have a PhD or anything like that, but Kelly and I have had really good instincts, and a lot of the educational foundations that we now use and that we have used fundamentally from the beginning have been proven by researchers as the absolute best practices. So I think whatever your business is, trusting yourself is a really powerful impetus to success, because you can do it authentically and you can be successful. And so for us, it hasn't changed tremendously. Other than the fact that some of our language is different. You know, our clients, which is predominantly, as you mentioned, universities, we do work with the military and some secondary education. But the biggest things that's changed is the way we look at sex and gender, and the way students speak about those things has changed tremendously. And so to be an effective educator and to effectively work with these populations, you have to understand that they view sex and gender very differently than they did 15 years ago.
How do they view it differently?
I think they're not as locked into traditional gender roles, and they're not as locked into traditional stereotypes. They want people to be able to identify themselves by pronouns. They want to make sure that education is always inclusive. They want to make sure that we're addressing microaggressions in a sense that, and that is very cultural. And they also, and this, I'm not going to spin out and go, but there's a different tone and tenor to how they like to be talked to. It's one of the reasons why certain speakers and certain things they find very triggering, because that is not the language. Their approach to the First Amendment can sometimes be different because, you know, they want a certain cultural norm in a community. And so some of that is different, but it's nothing is all good and nothing is all bad, but there's definitely some progress for inclusivity that I do think is good.
So what is more nerve-wracking, standing in front of 400 college kids and talking about sex, or watching your son play Little League Baseball?
That's a piece of cake, baseball. Although my boys are on a streak, and so it's hot time in the city. Just pour some out for Safety Harbor Little League. Yeah, my eldest went 4 for 5 on Friday night, so that was exciting.
Sweet. And you're married? You have 2 kids?
I do. I'm married to Chip, Chip Teeter, who's a very talented attorney in St. Petersburg, and truly 90% of the time my better half. He is.
I would go like 95.
He is.
And he seemed, and I don't know him as well as I know you, but he seems like the polar opposite of you.
We're very different. The way we see the world is very similar. Our approach to the world is absolutely different. And he is very grounding to me. He is very much a realist. He can sometimes be a little, the sky is falling.
Do you want to tell the story about how y'all met at that college party?
Okay, that's a good thing to end on. So I went to the University of West Florida in Pensacola. And, you know, I did not expect to find my greatest love there, but I did. But the night that I met him, I went to a sorority fraternity mixer that I did not want to attend. And I complained about it and had a very bad attitude, which was not totally off brand for me at the time. But so I go to this mixer. It's for Halloween. You know, so it's like a week before Halloween. And we're setting up. And by we, I mean everyone else, because I was sitting on the steps complaining about being there. And suddenly I hear one of my sorority sisters, whose politics I didn't agree with then, and I certainly don't now. But she was complaining about this grave injustice that had just taken place, that they just let the first woman into the Citadel, and we basically destroyed tradition in this country. And how could we just deny the vision of the founders, and yada, yada, yada. And it probably wasn't even that articulate. And then I hear this male voice start defending the right for women to have a presence in all places, and start defending the fact that it's a taxpayer-funded institution and should be equal for all. And just really articulate and really just speaking my love language. And I turn around and I'm like, I totally want to make out with that guy. And that's the first time I laid eyes on my husband.
And did you make out with him that night, if you don't mind me asking?
I did not, but it's not for lack of trying.
Oh, that's so cute. That is really cute.
But soon after.
So I have a question for you. So you visited a lot of college campuses, as do I. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering what your favorite one is.
Okay, so if I have to pick one, I usually do them by size.
Okay.
If I have to pick one
why don't you give me like mid-size, small,
So size does matter.
In cultural on campuses, yes.
Give me mid-size, small, and large. Like give me one of each.
I don't know if I know my mid-size. Hold on, let me think. My small one, which would, if I had to pick only one, in the whole, I've been on over 500 campuses, would be Elon in North Carolina.
Elon is great. Yeah.
It is. The culture there is sensational. So Elon would probably be my number one. My large one, as far as like the energy and the culture and what it felt like on campus, would have been Alabama. And my mid-size, what constitutes a mid-size school now? Gosh, I don't even know.
Like 30,000, 20,000?
No, probably about 20. Probably like West Florida is a midsize.
Okay, well, then I guess I got to pour it out for West Florida because without it, I wouldn't be here. So
they're great. It's a great campus.
they have a lot of opportunity for growth, but they're really, it was a wonderful place for me to learn and grow.
So now it's Ernest Hooper's turn to
I have
The hot seat.
I have nothing to share.
to answer questions and not
I'm
ask.
not answering anything.
So I will be the first one of the bunch to start. You are the longest, or one of the longest serving Tampa Bay Times columnists, writers, employees. Did you always want to be a newspaper writer? And if you didn't, what would your dream job be?
In 8th grade, I wanted to be a music star. Sadly, I couldn't play any musical instruments and I couldn't sing very well. So that didn't really work out for me. But yeah, from a very early time, I wanted to be a journalist. I kept a journal. I had to keep a journal in my 9th grade English class, and you had to write in it once a week to get a grade. And while my fellow students had essays and poetry and short stories and all kinds of different things, I would watch football and write game stories. And I had a journal full of stories about the Atlanta Falcons. And the teacher, Mrs. Polignano, recommended that I get on the high school newspaper staff. And ever since then, I wanted to work for a newspaper. And my interest kind of veered a little bit over time, but I eventually ended up where I think I was supposed to be, which is being a journalist. And I feel blessed to have found this career.
And you're a Florida Gator. Do you want to tell us some of the writings that you did as part of their newspaper?
Well, actually, when I first got to the University of Florida, my sister was there majoring in broadcasting, and she suggested that I go see the sports director at the campus radio station. And Larry Vitale, a great guy, gave me a chance, sight unseen. Oh, you're Teresa Hooper's brother? Okay, show up on Monday and you can start working here. I didn't get paid at first, but I seized that opportunity, and I actually spent 3 years working at the campus radio station and truly value that experience. I think it taught me a lot about how to write on deadline, how to be concise, and how to do good live interviews. So that was a big part of my foundation. And then I spent about the last 2 years after a 6-month stint at Chick-fil-A working for the Independent Florida Alligator and kind of learning the print side of the business.
Did you meet your wife in college?
I did meet my wife in college. I am married to my college sweetheart. In November, we will celebrate 30 years of marriage.
Mazel tov.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird thing. I, believe it or not, won a dance contest at the Wright Student Union, and the prize was a free visit to a hot tub place.
That doesn't sound problematic
in
at all.
1983, when not very many people had a hot tub in their backyard, there was a place where you could go to experience the sensation of being in a hot
I'm in the
tub.
wrong business.
And I took a girl named Sharon to the hot tub place, and we hung out there for a couple hours. And so I came home after that date and was lying on the floor in
Reliving the sensation.
in my bathroom watching TV. And I explained all of that to explain that my roommates had gone out without me. And they met some girls and decided to bring them back to the apartment to play Uno. So I was lying on the floor and the door opens And I just remember seeing this pair of legs and some white pumps. And that was the first thing I saw of my wife were her legs and adorned in white pumps.
Was it after Labor Day?
Ooh, I can't answer that question because I'll be guilty of telling on her. But yeah, that was how we met. And they came back. We played Uno. Her last name is Pierre. My mom taught French at Florida A&M. So I wrote down on a piece of paper, "Parlez-vous français?" And she said, "Oui, oui." And so I wrote down.
Now, was that a request or was she saying yes, yes?
So I wrote, "Cherchez-vous un bon ami?" Which means, are you looking for, literally it means, are you looking for a good friend or are you looking for a boyfriend? And she wrote, "Maybe." And so that was kind of how we met. But we were actually friends for more than a year before we actually started dating seriously.
And how many kids do you have?
Why was the hot tub story so funny? I don't know.
I have
It was
never
called
heard
a
I've
bar.
never heard actually going to some place to see what's in a
Well, and
hot
especially
tub.
the way you say it, to experience the sensation.
That's the one.
It's like
In the wet kiss.
I
and
didn't
the
think I didn't think that was a successful business model. But
It sounds very not
I guess
hygienic. It's like float tanks for today.
The
Okay.
water's hot. Of course it's hot.
All right, who's
Okay.
going to start the hot
Who's that?
tub bar?
oh my
bar in
god.
Tampa?
Okay, so I have
He's
to ask
our
you a
original hot
question.
tub time machine. Okay.
I was just thinking that too. I know some people who were in that movie too.
That's awesome.
You can
Okay,
Photoshop
wait,
him
wait,
into the-
before Carla asks her question, do you want to talk about your children or?
Well, real quick, because they are the pride and joy of my life.
Very sweet.
And there's nothing more important to me than being a father. I have 3 kids. Matthew is 26, Ethan's 25. They're 16 months apart. As my late mother used to say, they're Irish twins. They grew up together. They're close. I love the fact that they are not just brothers but friends. And then we spent several years, my wife and I, telling people we were only going to have 2 kids, and then we had a third. Bonus baby, surprise. And so she's 17, Madeline. She's the smartest of the 3. She's a high school junior, and I'm constantly telling her that her oldest brother is going to build his house out of straw. Her middle brother is going to build his house out of sticks, and she has to go out and get a really good job so she can build her house out of bricks and protect her brothers.
Aww.
She thinks I'm putting too much pressure on her, but she'll be fine.
I'm sure she's great.
What was your question,
Oh,
Carla?
I was gonna say 2 questions. One, like what is like your favorite thing you've ever written? And what do you think the best thing you've ever written is? It could be the same thing.
My favorite story is the one about interviewing my grandmother the day after Barack
That's
Obama
really cool.
mentioned her in his election night speech. And I think I've talked about that before. The best story I've written, it's interesting you ask. I recently spoke at the Florida Scholastic Press Association state conference, and that's a convention for high school kids who are on either newspaper or yearbook. And I like to talk to those kids about writing. And there's a couple of stories I always share, and one was kind of written out of anger, and it's a thought list. And I listed these different things I would change if I ruled the world, and it's almost kind of poetic, and I'm just kind of snapping them off, and I always share that with the kids, and it always plays very well. And I'm not sure how I came up with that idea, but it goes over really well.
What's your favorite place to eat? And what do you get there?
I have too many favorite places. I love food, as you can
Yeah,
tell.
I think we
by
all love
looking at
food.
me.
Yeah, if anyone wants to donate food to us, we'll try it on air and give you a review.
that'd be great.
Yes, that would be absolutely awesome.
Especially if you're listening, Island Way Grill.
You know what? I'm gonna give I have many favorite places, but I want to give a shout out to 2 places because I know the owners and they've been terrifically kind to me and some of my charitable efforts and giving me gift certificates that I can use to distribute so people can dine there. One would be Mise en Place and
Shout out to
Marianne Ferrance, who just is a terrific person and has been really, really generous. She is actually going to be inducted into the Hillsborough County Women's Hall of Fame this year. And she's very deserving. And then the other place you may or may not be familiar with is called 220 East on Davis Islands.
I like 220.
And Dave has been the owner there for a really, really long time. It's a very casual, cool place that specializes in great comfort food, American cuisine. He's a Dave Shapdalaz Dave, and love Dave, and he's been a terrific friend over the years too. And if you're ever looking for a very casual, cool experience, I definitely would recommend 220 East on Davis Islands. Anything else? You guys are easy, man.
You're not the
I'll
first to
answer
call
any
us that.
question.
Yeah, that was not. I went first. I want to redo, man. That was like
we
not.
hear a lot on the podcast about a lady by the name of Deneen. Do you have any idea who she is?
Nope.
I don't.
Weird.
I cannot. I'm going to decline to comment on this mysterious woman.
Okay, here's my last question for you. We can end on. You can take your wife on any kind of dream date. You can do anything, something maybe she asked for 20 years ago. You've just never had the time. Anything you can. What would, because you're a pretty romantic dude, what would you want to do for your wife?
First of all, I'm not sure my wife would describe me as romantic.
Well, maybe
Believe
you're
it
a
or not,
well-intentioned romantic
but-
that doesn't actually manifest the activity.
That's it. That's it.
So manifest. Tell us what you would do.
Well, we have gone to Las Vegas. She wants to return. She wants to go and renew our vows. She would love that. I think that's going to happen in the not too distant future. But for our wedding anniversary, we are tentatively planning on going to New York. We were married on Thanksgiving weekend. So the plan, the hope, if we can get tickets and hotel rooms and all of that, is to go and see the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
Oh, that's really cool. You were married on Thanksgiving weekend?
Yes.
So were we.
So a Florida
It's a great
Gator
weekend.
was married on the same weekend that y'all would have played FSU.
Like an actual gator or like him?
I think in 1989,
Oh,
the
was
game was being played the week before Thanksgiving. But it's funny you mentioned that. The day we got married in Miami, where my wife is from, and on that day, Notre Dame played Miami. And
Was that the Catholics versus convicts?
that was the game
Like-
after the Catholics versus convicts, the chapter 2, if you will, and Miami won handily. But we had a morning wedding because someone had beat us to the church that my wife grew up in, and had booked the evening spot. And I honestly believe the priest had tickets to the game and hurried through the wedding. I mean, he was really like, come on. I had a friend, Mike Cobb, who's a terrific singer who actually lives in Hawaii and sings professionally now. And I had him slated to sing 2 songs. And the priest was like, just have him do one. hurry up. We got to go. And
That's
so
funny.
we got married. We had the reception. And then the groomsmen and I all went back to the hotel and watched the Miami Notre Dame game while my
Very
wife and all the
romantic.
bridesmaids went shopping.
Yeah, very, very romantic.
Yeah, how's that for a honeymoon?
Man, I think I gave you a little too much credit. I think that's what,
I think
what
you
just
did.
happened
I think
here.
you did.
Gosh, I'm gonna have to send your wife some flowers or something, an act of kindness. All right. Well, it was wonderful drilling down to get to know you better and to hear more wonderful stories from all of y'all.
I want to give everyone a chance to give a final thought about themselves. Carla,
What's
anything
your
we missed?
astrological signs?
You know,
I
and we
am
didn't talk
a-
about your love of Disney either.
Oh, God.
Jump in
Oh,
real
God.
quick. Can
Okay,
you
so-
sum that up in 30 seconds?
So I go drinking around the world sometimes with my husband, and we really enjoy going around to the countries.
This
and
is for you, Ken.
for Flower Garden and for food and wine.
Have
Although
you ever ridden all the Disney rides in one day?
No, because I don't go to the other parks. I just go to the World Showcase, and we actually don't have a Disney pass anymore. I let it lapse, but yeah, I'll get it again soon when we're ready to go. We just haven't been in a while, and we've been busy.
Wow.
I mean, we've been really, really busy. So, but I do enjoy Flower Garden, and I really like food and wine. So I like doing that.
I do know we've learned a lot about Disney counterculture from Carla.
Mm-hmm.
There's
I was just
a
actually
whole
texting
world.
with a Disney blogger who was at my favorite wine bar in my spot. And so she took a picture of it, and we've been texting back and forth. So
Chris, give us a final thought. What did we miss?
I am very excited that the Tampa Bay Rays, after 15 games, are in first place. They've had an amazing start. Currently, they are 4.5 game. They have a 4.5 game lead over the New York Yankees for first place in the American League East. So go Rays.
Go Rays. I think we all feel that way.
not me.
They do. What is
I'm Yankees. I'm Tampa Yankees. I grew up here, and I'm sorry. I grew up here, and the Tampa Yankees were a big part of the community, and
You're
yeah.
such a rebel, Carla.
I am sorry. And I have a lot of friends that work there.
My
was
first
this
job
close.
ever was
Yeah.
as a bat boy for the Jacksonville Suns.
I had it.
And
Yeah.
2 players on that team went on to have prominent careers, one of which is Gabe Kapler, who is the current manager of the Philadelphia Phillies. A great guy. Or he was a great guy back then. I assume he's still a great guy.
Yeah.
And the leadoff hitter, who is a legend in Boston for stealing the biggest base in Boston Red Sox history, is Dave Roberts, who is now the manager
Cool.
of the Los Angeles Dodgers.
That's cool.
Becca, any final thoughts? What did we not touch on about your intriguing personality?
I am a 4th generation Floridian, and I have been receiving text messages from my dad and brother the whole time we've been together today. Very family centered. I'm a Libra.
I love your dad.
My dad is a great
I love
guy.
your dad too.
Everybody loves Ray. Everybody loves Raymond. Sounds like a name for a show.
Judge Raymond Gross, folks.
And I don't know. I think that I have a theater degree and wanted to be in theater or talk radio. So, Chris did theater when he was younger. Vito is a theater guy, our producer. Carla has a theater background. So does Ernest. So I think that, we're just a couple wacky thespians sitting around a table. But one thing that didn't get covered that I think is really important that doesn't give enough shout outs, and I'm happy to give a shout out to my dad, but we talked a lot about Chris's father, but Chris's mother may be the nicest person I've ever met. And I think we should pour some out for Betty.
Retired Florida public school teacher of
And
30 years.
As proud as she is of you, I'm sure she's alarmed at some of your policy, but nonetheless, Ms. Betty Jackson is an exceptional woman and has been a delight. Really, really the crowning jewel in Chris's entourage. Next, her and Rachel.
She is a wonderful woman.
She's exceptional.
It was sweet.
That
It's
was
true.
really
You
nice.
haven't met Betty. She is like sweetness and like goodness incarnate.
Well, I'll close out by giving a shout out to Colin and Vito for helping make
Amen.
this
Yeah.
podcast work. We're so grateful to you guys, and I love being here. I love being on this podcast, and I love the relationship that has developed between us, and I look forward to many more podcasts.
Now it's time for road tripping. See y'all in Tallahassee next week.
Yep. See you in Tallahassee next week.
Bye.
I'm coming home. And that's all I'm saying.